about 6 ways to shift into the mindset of a transformational change leader. So whether it's large-scale disruption or just an everyday readjustment to a new status quo, being that confident and effective change leader starts with, of course, managing yourself, leading yourself through change, but then leading others. And so today we'll tour through 6 self-management tools to fearlessly navigate change while also guiding others along as they shift and adapt. Welcome, as always, to our corporate partners. Thank you, thank you. We so appreciate your partnership and helping us bring these learnings, these career and leadership development learnings, to a wider audience within your organization. And we're welcoming back our longtime subscribers, MetLife, GM, and NetApp. We so appreciate you. I'm your host for the webinar. My name is Jo Miller. I'm CEO of Be Leaderly. I am the thrilled to bits, wet your pants excited, first-time author of the upcoming book, Woman of Influence, 9 Steps to Build Your Brand, Establish Your Legacy, and Thrive. Mark your calendar for launch day. It's December 1. We'll be following up with some ways to get involved in the book launch, and even have me come on site and work with you and do a book tour stop. So welcome, everyone. It's great to work with you. And so in today's program, we're of course talking about leading ourselves and others through change. Now, a fundamental principle here to be aware of is that we all deal with change differently. Here's a prime example. Think of your pets. Imagine taking your dog, your puppy, on a car ride. What does the dog say? The dog says, "Yay, yippee, we're going on a car ride." All right, now imagine taking your kitty on a car ride. The kitty's not saying yay or pee. The kitty is saying, we are all going to die. That's a great reminder of the fundamental principle that we all deal with change differently. And look, even the most positive of changes can be tough to navigate. For example, think about the excitement of buying a new home, and all of the change that involves. Well, as it turns out, many Americans, roughly 40%, say that buying a new home is the most stressful event in modern life. And here's the timely one. It's even more stressful than hosting a Thanksgiving dinner. So, of course, even the most positive changes require us to take a step back and think and act differently in order to navigate and embrace and roll with change. Even the most positive changes can be tough and challenging. Now, dealing with change isn't something that's optional now in our work lives. It's really more of a given. One forecast predicts that half of the companies on the S&P 500 today are expected to fall off the list within the decade. Think about that. Half of the largest companies are going to be replaced in the next decade. So to quote my friend Mona Sabay, you must lead change or change is going to lead you. Change initiatives are becoming the norm. Disruption to your company and industry are becoming the norm. Here are just some of the changes that people in our Be Leaderly community are navigating right now. There's one global team moving to agile methodology. There's a company-wide digital transformation going on. This one might seem familiar. There are people picking up the slack after their teammates were let go or laid off, and no replacements were hired. One company that we know of had been acquired and was in the middle of the integration following that acquisition when it was announced that it's merging with another company. And so change is now the norm, and the ability to deal with change and roll with disruption and navigate it effectively, productively is now one of the most critical workplace skills there is. And if you're able to envision and lead change, I would say that that's one of the most valuable forms of career insurance. And as someone once said, if you dislike change, you're going to dislike becoming irrelevant even more. All right, so we're going to try and open up the poll and see results. I'm going to do some fancy footwork here to another screen. Let's see how we do. Oh, wow. Look at this, you guys. Thank you, thank you. So I had asked, in 4 words or less, what's one thing that you've done to develop a change leader mindset? Oh, these are great, and so many and varied. I'm just going to pick off a couple. Someone said, be a knowledge sponge. Here's a fist bump for you, knowledge sponge. Someone else has noticed the opportunity to make breakout career moves. Someone has volunteered to manage projects. Another person talked about the opportunity for continuous learning. Someone else is embracing the new, being adaptable. And one person, look, this is right there in the middle, said, attended the program today. So thanks everyone for taking a look at the things that you're doing to move into that mindset of being an effective change leader. All right, thanks for your input. I'm going to attempt. Oh, wow, we did it. We moved back to the slides. This is great. Okay, so here's what's ahead in our time together today. So you probably already know some of the basic principles of change management. It's things like articulating your vision and the milestones for where you'd like to end up after the change. It's things like creating a sense of urgency and building your guiding coalition and enlisting support, being that leader who's removing roadblocks and barriers and creating the short-term wins. And so those are just some of the commonly known steps that it takes to be an effective change leader. And by the way, if you're not familiar with those and you'd like to learn more, look up Kotter's 8 Steps for Managing Change, and I'll give you that recommended reading and resource later in the program. And so building on all of those commonly known principles for change management, I had the opportunity to have a series of conversations with women leaders, many of them in past webinars and also people that I interviewed for my book. And so I'm going to share some additional ways to build the mindset of a change leader. And so whether you're the one initiating the change or rolling out a change that was mandated for you to leave, or rolling with a change that's happening all around you, here are some mindset shifts that I hope are going to serve you well and be of value. And as I go through the 6, I want you to think about which one of these in particular is going to be yours to focus on going forward, to be that future-facing, forward-focused change leader who's guiding and bringing others along with you. All right, so with the 6 elements of the mindset of a change leader, number 1 is to up-level your mindset from optimizer to transformer. So one very reliable way to stand out as a high performer, especially early on in your career, is to be what I like to call an optimizer. And an optimizer is someone who takes any role or process or project or task that he or she is handed and makes it better. And the best optimizers are ones who are on an unstoppable quest for enhancements. They're developing and streamlining processes, they're reducing budgets, they're speeding up execution, and they're enhancing their own productivity. However, if you want to make a bigger impact, I'm going to encourage you to upgrade your mindset from optimizer to transformer. So stop looking for those incremental improvements in the role that's right in front of you and look beyond your role, across the team, across the organization, for ways to be a more transformational thinker and leader. One former leader with NetApp who I interviewed for my book and in a previous webinar is Donna Munch, one of my favorite leaders. And Donna pointed out that it's helpful to ask yourself, what's the extent of the change that I'm driving? So if you want to up-level your mindset from optimizer to being a transformer, ask yourself, what's the breadth and the extent of the scope of the change that I'm driving? Think about, are you maintaining the status quo, or are you causing, or are you thinking differently? So think about whether you're an optimizer who chips away at the kind of change that doesn't create broad transformation, doesn't threaten the status quo, doesn't require you or anyone to think differently or learn more skills. Instead, Think like a transformer who sets out to create the type of groundbreaking change that requires a completely new way of thinking and operating. It's what Donna calls irreversible change, a change that can't be easily undone. So scale up your aspirations and think about going after broader transformational change that can't be easily reversed. Think about what needs to be different 5 years from now, not what needs to be improved or enhanced today, tomorrow, or even next week, but think with that more futuristic, aspirational, visionary view. So it's about change that can't be undone. So when a transformer's work is done, the pickle can't go back to being a cucumber, and a pork chop can never go back to being a piglet. That's our definition of transformational change. Layla Pahashmi is another leader that I quoted in today's session and in my book. And I think she put it beautifully when she said it's time to put down your microscope and pick up your telescope. So put away the microscope and pick up the telescope. And so don't think for a moment that you need a large team or even a lot of positional authority to become a wildly successful leader of broad-scale, sweeping, transformational change. You know, it's okay to start small. The problem you tackle doesn't have to be large. It just has to be important. So think about one area in which you could be that transformer, creating irreversible change. So the first of our 6 ways to develop a change leader mindset is to scale up level your thinking from being an optimizer to being more of a transformer. All right, ready for the next one? Next up comes number 2, which is to be a discerning disruptor. You know, we hear a lot about disruption, but the question really is, when and how do you choose to shake up the status quo? So be a discerning disruptor. As Nora Denzel, who's a board director with AMD and Ericsson, has said, if you don't take these types of risks, if you don't take risks, you'll always work for someone who does. So in business, as in our lives and our careers, some rules were meant for breaking. The tough question is, though, how do you figure out which ones those are? So some rules were meant for breaking. Early on in your career, taking orders from your boss and doing the things that you're told, executing the tasks and projects that you're given, never coloring outside the lines of your job description, those are the things that are going to earn you credit as a good team player early on, but won't catapult you further and doesn't make you a change leader. For that, you need to shift from being someone who takes orders, so shift from order taker, to being more of a rule breaker and a risk taker, because of course, as we all know, some conventional business rules were just made to be broken. See if any of these sound familiar. You know, one of those rules we hear is it's important to diversify your client base. Another is don't launch a business unless you have a solid business plan. Here's another one of those rules. Don't turn away business from a major customer. Now, I know these are the conventional laws of business, but I know women who have challenged and broken every one of these so-called rules and been wildly successful. Someone said, you can't do that, or it's never been done before, and they replied, watch me. And so with courage and good grace and persistence, they were able to lead wildly successful change by breaking through the conventional rule book. But of course, you need to be discerning in how you disrupt. How do you know which rules to bend or to break? Well, Holly Meidel was one of our interview guest speakers a couple of years ago and talked about breaking the rules. And early on in her career, there was an unwritten rule of career advancement at a company she worked at. And that rule was you can't leave your career when you're at your height. It will derail you. And she was told, if you leave, you'll never return into a significant leadership role. And yet Holly knew in her heart that she wanted to step away while her children were young, to spend time with her young family. And so nonetheless, she broke the rules, she stepped away. And during that time was active in her children's school and in her community and learned a ton about grassroots collaborative leadership. And so when she stepped back onto the career track and returned, those leadership skills had her leapfrog into a national leadership role. And so it was during that time that she developed her appetite for rule breaking and risk taking and being a discerning disruptor. Holly says that in our current global economy, companies need rule breakers and they need risk takers. And in fact, these days when Holly is reviewing a resume from a potential job applicant, she looks for evidence of risk taking, knowing that that is such a critical skill in today's global economy. So building on some lessons that I learned from Holly that she learned from a college professor early in her career, we have 3 rules for rule breakers. 3 rules for rule breakers. So when you're considering shaking up the status quo and being a risk taker and a rule breaker and causing some disruption and change, here are 3 rules to run your idea by. The first is don't risk a lot for a little. Second of our 3 rules for rule breakers is don't risk more than you can afford to lose. And then finally, consider the odds or consider the potential consequences. So there you have it, our 3 rules for rule breakers. Make these your rules to live by so that you can be that discerningly disruptive change maker and dispense with the status quo and know when to say yes to change and when to back off. So I want you to think about a change or a disruption that you're currently thinking of implementing, or maybe some way that you're considering breaking the conventional rule book. Run that idea by the 3 rules for rule breakers. So ask yourself, you know, is this going to be a good decision? Number 1, don't risk a lot for a little. Number 2, don't risk more than you can afford to lose. And number 3, consider the odds or the potential consequences. And, you know, as you think through those 3 rules, go ahead and then make your decision. Decide, is this your time to step out and disrupt and be a change maker? All right, so we're going through the list of our 6 ways to develop a change leader mindset. And number 3 is to get people to agree on the problem. Number 3 is to agree on the problem. Layla Hashimi is a transformational change leader, and she's now Vice President of Business Operations with Ancestry.com. But when I interviewed her for this webinar series earlier in her career, she was with a previous company, and she'd been charged with leading a truly audacious change initiative. She had the mandate to change the way that 5,000 employees work so that they could become more customer focused in their approach, and so that those employees in turn could transform the way that citizens of the world use money. Okay, so no small plans. It was a really audacious goal. And the results that she drove were remarkable. In just 18 months, there was a 55% boost in productivity and a 10-fold increase in the company's product releases. So think about that, 18 months, 55% an increase in productivity, 10 times increase in the amount of products that they were releasing into the marketplace. Oh, and by the way, there's just one more thing. She pulled all of this off with a very small team and very little positional power, and it all came down to her ability to influence. So here's one of her top keys to success. Layla says, getting people engaged with a problem that they care deeply about and want to solve is one of the most effective ways to influence. But she says what often happens is when people want to lead change, they jump to brainstorming solutions. So people start to take sides and argue about whose idea is best. People are defending their idea. They're talking over each other. They're not listening to what really needs to happen. And Layla says the real issue here, the core issue, is that everyone's trying to solve a different problem. And without that agreement, you can't tap into the power of a community that care deeply about a common cause. So in our session on the new rules of teamwork back in April, Selena spoke about the cause effect, how high performing projects have at their heart a palpable cause or a mission. And for change to be possible, for change to occur, that core mission, that cause needs to be compelling and meaningful. So Step 3 in developing a change leader mindset is to agree on the problem. And if you can get people to agree on what the problem is first, instead of jumping to generating and defending ownership of solutions, you can really rally a group around a common solution. So once you've agreed on that problem, next you need to rally your crew and lead with passion. So that brings us to number 4. And number 4 is called Rally Your Crew. It's about getting people on board with you to lead change together. Now, of course, there's a lot that you can accomplish by yourself, but if you want to do bigger things, it's going to take a community. One of my favorite sayings right now is, individually we're strong, but collectively we are mighty. And when it comes to leading transformative change, as opposed to being an optimizer of what's within your immediate reach, you really need to bring together a community. As Layla says, you have to speak with energy and enthusiasm, showing your desire to help your organization move to a better place. Passion becomes infectious, and when that happens, people will want to join you. So you've got to find that passion for the change that you're looking to lead. So when Layla Pahashmi had her problem identified, got everyone agreeing on the problem, and then had identified solutions, she faced a new challenge, and it was how she and her tiny team could get 5,000 employees across this organization to be invested in making change, to take ownership of the change. And so they started to have conversations about the change. And as they did, and as they got people agreeing on the problem, they looked for volunteers who cared as much about the issue as they did. And they enlisted the support of 500 passionate people across the organization who became their passionate change champions. Every champion spoke to at least 10 people about the change and what the problem was and why it was necessary and what was being done and why. So they educated others across the organization about the change and shared their passion. And along the way, they were able to, through that group of passionate change champions, enlist the support of 5,000 employees to take ownership of the change. So when it comes to rallying your crew, communicate with passion, because of course your passion will be infectious and people will want to join you. And look for people who care as much about the change as you do. And along the way, enlist their support as your passionate change champions. All right, so I'm going to share 3 types of people to include in your change crew. And this is the first, it's your passionate change champions. The next is really key, and it's your executive sponsors. So there's been some research done on this. Here's what they found. Change doesn't just need leadership, it actually needs sponsorship. So there's been research that points to that an active and visible executive sponsor is the #1 success factor for major change initiatives. And that comes from a best practices in change management benchmarking study. And so think about, if you're leading a change or have tried to lead a change, what was your biggest challenge and what got in your way? And I would propose that it was possibly along the lines of the relationship of the change sponsor. And so perhaps you had no change sponsor and had to rally people all on your own, and it was really tough to get their commitment. Or maybe you lacked the influence or the resources to get your message out. Or perhaps you had people that were not in alignment who you needed to get on board. Or, you know, maybe it was just that that consistent message was not getting out at the right time, at the right level, to the right people. So here are some of the ways to work with your sponsors. So here's what you'll need from them so that you as a change agent and a change leader can succeed. And by the way, these elements are especially important if you're not the one initiating a change, but you're still the one that's charged with implementing it. So first, your sponsor needs to demonstrate their commitment. Next up, contribute their influence. then they need to help allocate the types of resources and budget that you need to make change happen. Then they'll have to help with creating the alignment between the various teams and groups and stakeholders and businesses to ensure that everyone's lined up with the overall change direction and that it fits within the company's overall direction and goals and strategic plan. And so these are the things that you'll need to coach your change sponsor to support you with. So at times when you're not necessarily the most senior level leader in a change initiative, but you're charged with making change happen, your role then becomes to coach and enlist the support and the engagement of your senior level sponsors so that they can contribute all of these elements and make your life as a change leader a whole lot easier. By the way, I heard a consultant refer to that senior level sponsor as the chief repeating officer because you know, you can never message the change too frequently. So enlist the support of your executive sponsor as your chief repeating officer to repeat the message again and again and again, clearly and simply and repetitively. All right, so enlisting the support of your sponsor in advance and coaching your sponsors along the way so that they have a clear sense of their role is going to make your life so much easier and more smooth as a change leader because you'll enlist their support to champion your change effectively. All right, I mentioned 3 types of people that you'll enlist when you take the role of a change leader or a change agent. The first is, of course, your passionate change champions, the people you meet along the way who care as much about the change and the problem and the vision as you do, and enlist their support to help make the change happen, to get the message out, to get others to take ownership. So the first is having those passionate change champions. Next, of course, those change sponsors, those senior executives who provide their commitment, influence, resources, alignment, and also be the chief repeating officer, repeating that message. And then the final subset of person is going to be the largest. It's everyone else. And it's especially the change adopters, the people that you want to embrace change and move forward with change, the targets of the change. So I want you to think about right now, if you are currently trying to drive or lead some type of change, is there someone that is not entirely on board? If so, who is it? Which group will you need to reach out to and work with to rally your crew in order to make change happen? Is it enlisting the support of your passionate change champions? Is it enlisting the support of and coaching your change sponsors? Or is it helping your change adopters guide and navigate through change and ultimately take ownership so the change will really stick? So again, think about who you as a change agent most need to reach out to and work with and get on board in order for your change to be successful. Change champions, change sponsors, or change adopters. And so when it comes to working with your change adopters, the 5th element here of a change leader mindset is empathy. You've got to be empathetic. Among the change leaders that I interviewed, empathy was a key quality that they mentioned of people that lead change with influence and not necessarily positional power. So if you want to lead change with influence and not positional authority, empathy is going to be a key leadership skill in your toolkit. You may have seen this diagram before. It's a timeless one. It's called the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it really shows, it really lays out how dealing with any change can be tough and why it can feel like such an emotional roller coaster. So starting off on right over to the left-hand side, we've got our morale and competence axis. And then we're looking at the change in people's productivity and mood and morale and competence over time after a change gets announced. So, you know, of course, the first thing that happens is there's this abrupt announcement or shock or surprise at the new event. And what can happen is people get caught off guard. They possibly are blindsided. And after receiving that initial announcement and processing the shock of it, what often happens is people then move into a state of denial and disbelief. They start saying, this can't be happening to me. They look for evidence that it isn't true, that it isn't possible. And from there, you'll see that their mood and morale and productivity start to decline as people go into a sense of frustration, possibly anger. There will be confusion, maybe blame or gossip, or skepticism, maybe trash talking about the change itself, and those that are responsible for the change. So people go from shock to denial into a state of frustration, and they start to, to vent. And from there, we hit the lowest point of morale and productivity, which is that people can dip into a state called depression. It's where people's mood is low, they're lacking in energy. You can see them become overcome by inertia. And if you see this going on around you, what I want you to remember is that this is the necessary point in the change curve before they start to pivot and be able to move forward. So next we start to head up the curve back into a better place of productivity and morale. We start to get people engaged again. People start to experiment and engage with a new situation, and they stop focusing on what's been lost and start thinking about and exploring what these new changes mean and figuring out how they might adapt. And so once you start to see that shift towards experimentation and engagement, then you know that you're on the upswing toward the point that you envisioned when you first started to lead and communicate the change. Next, people come to a decision point where they let go of the past and decide, okay, the change has become normal. It's the new status quo, and they start building new ways of working. And only now will you, as a change agent or a change leader, start to see that productivity rebound. But people will be learning how to navigate the new situation, how to work effectively, and generally you'll see that mood lift and start to see them being more positive. And then, of course, the final stage, integration, this is the one that you've been waiting for all along. This is what you envisioned when you first initiated or started to lead change. This is where the change is firmly the new normal. People have embraced new ways of working, and that productivity and idea generation and thinking really gets unleashed, and as you'll see, comes to an even higher point than you started from right back in the beginning. And so again, this is the Kubler-Ross change curve. It's timeless, but it's also a really valuable tool for us as change leaders to know that not everyone processes change at the same rate and in the same way. And it is a great reminder of the stages, those first 4 stages in which people can really get stuck. So as change leaders, of course, what we want to have happen is that people scoot rapidly through the curve to the final stage. You know, day 1 we'll make the announcement. Day 2, we'd love to see them integrate. And yet, you know, no matter how clear your business case was or how compelling the vision you're painting is, no matter how effective and well thought out your change management plan, you're still going to think, okay, why isn't everyone on board? So think back to the change curve when that's the point. All right, I promised there'd be a point where I asked you to stand up. So can I get you to do this? Can I get everyone to go ahead and stand up if you're able? And what we're going to do is we're going to hand gesture through the change curve as a way of really making it stick. So, all right, everyone standing up. Our first point in the change curve is the shock of the announcement. And then people are continuing a little until they hit that point of denial. And then you'll see morale start to plummet and people will move into frustration and then plunge into that depression, that low mood, that low point, before they start to get the upswing and start to experiment From there, we get to the decision point, and then finally we take it over the top with the integration, where the change has become the new normal and people are bouncing back in terms of productivity, but also taking ownership of the change. All right, stay standing where you are. We're going to do it one more time, a little more quickly. I know it's cheesy, but you've got to admit it's memorable. And as we do, as we gesture through the change curve, I want you to think about, if you're dealing with a change today, which one of these points resonates most for you? Or if you're leading change today, which one of these points do you think your group is currently up to? All right, so number one, the shock, the surprise of the new. And we continue up a little into denial before heading down into frustration. We hit the pit of depression, and then we start to pivot and turn around. There's that experimentation. There's that decision point, and then finally integration. All right, one more time. Shock, denial, frustration, depression, experiment, decision, integration. All right, again, cheesy but memorable. Give yourself a round of applause, and let's do this because we're embracing change today. Before you sit down, do a completely new dance move that you've never done before on a count of 3. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, we got you. You can sit down again now. All right, thanks everyone. Hopefully that made it completely memorable and something that you're able to look out for, because your role as a change leader is not to try to force people through the curve as rapidly as you can, but to meet people where they are, understand what they're dealing with so that you can help them understand where they're at, and you can provide the appropriate coaching and support to move them forward to the integration stage. Remember the dog and the cat? People deal with change in very different ways, and everyone moves through this curve at their own unique pace. And of course, we all get stuck at our own unique points as well. So, you know, the people that you're working with are going through different reactions to multiple changes at once, not only one at a time. I wish that was the case. And not only at work, consider that people may be going through change in their home lives as well. So as a change agent and change leader, be cognizant that there might be more to this than what you assume or what you see on the purpose. So again, your role as the change leader is to understand where they are, help them understand, and provide that coaching and support to move through change. For example, in the pre-webinar questions, one of you asked what to do with a team member who's very change averse. And so if that's something you're dealing with, I want you to look at the first 4 points on the change curve and ask yourself, where does the person appear to be stuck? Or are they even taking tentative steps forward, but also backsliding? Because we can see that happen as well. And if they're stuck in those first few phases, the downswing, some ways to work with them are, of course, to listen and ask questions, and you know, allow them to vent. Be that sounding board for any of the frustration that they need to let off. And also check if they got the information they need. Give them the context for the change, what the problem was, why it's important, where you hope to come to in the end. So give them that context, the information, and any direction they need, and also talk through any of the risks or potential downsides that they might have, either perceived or actual. So of course, this is where our empathy really comes into play. And then as you see people start to move into the upswing, your role as a change leader shifts. It's time now to encourage those tentative steps and give people positive reinforcement and facilitate the brainstorming and idea generation, so that they can start to co-create that new normal, that new reality. Help people take ownership of the change and of the new parts of their responsibilities or skills or roles. And then as you get toward integration, one great question to ask as a change leader and a change coach is, what are we learning? So that you encourage the mastery of new roles and new skills, but also reinforce what's been learned along the way. This next slide might make sense to a lot of you too, who are very passionate about change, who are comfortable with change, but notice that not everyone else is moving at the same pace. So we have the same axes here. We're looking at the productivity and morale and competence of a group over time that's going through change. But you'll notice that there are 3 separate curves here, and these correspond to our 3 different groups of people that we work with to implement change. So the first, of course, is our change sponsors, who, you know, can tend to be top leadership, senior executives, or possibly even change management consultants or experts. And so these are people that are fairly comfortable with change. They're often the ones announcing or coming up with the initiative. So you'll notice they tend to be way through the curve into the decision phase, oftentimes before anyone else even gets wind of the change and goes into that first stage of surprise or shock or even disbelief. Next up, we have ourselves. We're the change agents and the change leaders, as well as any passionate change champions whose support we've enlisted to help us communicate and create that change. Again, you know, we're people who tend to roll with change. We embrace it. We love to be a part of change. We clearly see the vision. So we react fairly rapidly to that initial change announcement, and then move through to, you know, decision and integration. Sometimes before the mainstream of employees, and we'll call these our change adopters. This is everyone else. These are the people who really are having to roll with change, the boots on the ground that really make the change work. And so, as you'll know, they're often, as you'll see, they're often the last to hear about the change, and so there's that delayed reaction. And I would even, if I was to correct this diagram, extend the time frame for those change adopters, though not for everyone, but there will be people who feel very stuck or are moving to decision and integration at a less rapid pace. And so I want you to think about, if there's been a change that you've dealt with recently or one that you're currently trying to work on and drive, how does this diagram match up to your reality? It may or may not, but it certainly gives some insight into just some ways of thinking about the pace at which people react and respond to change and how much it can vary. In my conversation with Layla Pahashami, she said transformation agents who are always thinking futuristically tend to be a few steps ahead of where everyone else is. So you have to meet people where they're at, and you've got to have empathy. You've got to have empathy, understand where people are today, map out the stepping stones to reach that vision, so people can see where they're going to go. So this is why of our 6 ways to develop a change leader mindset, empathy is absolutely key. You've got to step out of your mindset and meet people where they're at. All right, final one. Number 6 of the 6 ways to develop your change leader mindset, and it is to be relentless. You've got to have conviction in order to influence change. One of the things that Layla Pahashami, that transformational change leader, said to me is, if I don't come across as having conviction that a change will get us to a better place, how can I convince anyone else that that's the case? So your conviction will help you persist when things get hard, she said, and she said, believe me, things will get hard. So be relentless and have conviction. She said, not everything you try is going to work. Okay, be prepared for that. Not everything you try will work, so you have to keep trying new things until something sticks and the change becomes self-sustaining. And until that happens, you've just got to be relentless and you've got to keep trying. Layla said, if you don't feel this way about the change you want to lead, you might want to consider picking a different change as your goal. I would add to that, you might want to reframe your thinking about the end result and the reason why you're creating this change, and even why that initial problem was such an important one to address. So see if you can find that passion and conviction and relentlessness. Because as Layla says, when you can bring these qualities, you'll make a lot of change and you'll have a really great career. All right, so that's it. We've worked all our way through the 6 ways to develop your change leader mindset. And I want you to think about now, which of these is the one that you want to work on in order to fearlessly, in a future forward way, face the future and be someone who's leading and guiding others toward that better future? Is it that you will up-level from optimizer to transformer? Or is it, number 2, be discerningly disruptive? Figure out which rules were made to be broken in order to move from being an order taker to a rule breaker and a risk taker. Next, is it to get people to agree on the problem? Remember, first you've got to agree on the problem. People typically jump towards brainstorming solutions and claiming ownership of and defending the solutions. But the real issue is you're all trying to solve a different problem. So think if getting people to agree on the problem, doing that listening tour, stepping into their world is your first step to develop a change leader mindset. All right, next is rally your crew. And we have the first 2 of the types of people that we need in our change leadership crew. One is to enlist those passionate change champions, the people that care as much about the change as you do, who can help get your message out and educate others about the change and why it's important, and start to influence and get them on board. But of course, the ultimate influencer that we need in our crew is that senior executive sponsor. So think about whether you need to enlist or coach or continue to engage your executive sponsor. Remember, that's the number 1 reason why change initiatives fail, is for that lack of sponsorship. Or is your step to be empathetic, to think about those who are the ultimate targets of your change adopters, who may be moving through that change curve at a later or a later time or a slower pace. And what can you do to step into their world, provide them with the information and support that they need, and start to work with them to guide them to a better place? Or finally, is it to tap into your passion and conviction in order to be relentless, be that relentless champion of change? All right, if all goes well, I'm going to direct you back to the poll again, because I want you to go back to that same browser and pull up pollev.com/leaderly, pollev.com/leaderly. Our new question is, which one of these mindset shifts will you embrace? So what will you do to fearlessly face into the future while guiding others towards it? So which of our 6 elements of the change leader mindset is going to be yours to go ahead and embrace? Go ahead and drop your pin on the appropriate point. And I'm going to go ahead and take some questions now. These are the questions that came in before the program. So thanks everyone that sent your questions in. Here were some that resonated and stood out for me. The first is, it comes from Jennifer. And Jennifer, I love this question you asked: how can I be a meaningful leader in a changing work environment? So how can I be a meaningful leader in a changing work environment? And I think, of course, the first key is to, agree on the problem. So you want to have a meaningful problem, but I also think use your empathy. So then you're truly being a leader who's relevant to what people need from you. But then I'd add on that to say we all have our own unique leadership strengths, our innate strengths. And so I encourage you to think about reconnecting with yours, and connecting the dots from your leadership strengths to what's really needed and relevant and useful in a changing work environment. And so, you know, think about your strengths. Are you great at lifting people up when they're having a crummy day? Or are you the person who's great at rallying people around the goal? Or are you really great at diving into the research and understanding a concept and teaching it to others in a way that they can be more educated about what's going on? Or perhaps you're a great asker of questions and a great listener in such a way that helps people hear themselves in a different way, make new realizations and move forward. Or perhaps you're that one who's just really good at reminding people in a moment what they're good at to boost their confidence. So Jennifer, being a meaningful leader in a changing work environment can mean so many different things. Look to yourself and your leadership strengths and match that to what's needed. And also notice your weaknesses and enlist the support of others whose weaknesses are whose strengths are complementary to your own. Yeah, so great question. Thanks, Jennifer. The next one that I'll come to comes from Hope, because Hope, it sounds like Hope is taking over a change initiative and wanted to know how to navigate a change that's already in progress when she joined a team. All right, so you're coming new into a team and either taking over a change initiative, or perhaps you're stepping into a team as a team member when change is already underway. So Hope, I would say that you have a real distinct advantage here, and you should leverage the heck out of it, which is that you're not jaded or threatened or fearful or you know, needing to defend old ways of working or a certain perspective or certain plan or course of action. So what you bring to the team is a completely fresh set of eyes. So the advantage and the benefit that you bring is your energy and your enthusiasm. So I encourage you to really make full use of that. You might want to get out and talk to people, ask questions, listen along the way. You'll build allies. And you'll also get to understand more rapidly what is or isn't working about the current approach. And as you start to win people's trust, begin to make suggestions from what you're able to see. So don't ever see you coming new into a team or taking over a change initiative as a disadvantage. You can really bring something fresh and new to the group. All right, I am hoping that we have, oh yeah, we do. All right, just bear with me here a moment. I am going to try and make a switch over to the poll and X out of the old one, bump us into the new one. Bear with me here a moment or two, folks. I think it's going to be worth it. I asked, what steps will you take to fearlessly face the future and embrace change? And you know, what I see here is that it's a whole lot of different things, and that's wonderful, isn't it? Because it looks like you're all looking at taking very different actions. Not sure about the three at the top of the screen. So 3 of you are completely off the map there, hopefully in a good way. Those are our most forward-thinking people. But it actually looks like quite an even spread of what everyone else is going to do to fearlessly face the future as a change leader and guide others towards it. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to leave that up for a moment. I have one more question that's come in from Simone. Simone has asked, what questions can be used to engage the mindset change of upper management? So it's kind of, how do you lead change upward and influence your senior management? Maybe unspoken here is, how can you enlist their support as your change sponsors? Simone, I would come back to the basics here of leading change. Number one, just be so grounded in your business case and tie your business case to your leaders' goals and their overall strategy, so they can see why it's an important part of what they need to do. But of course, you know, the number one fundamental rule of influencing upward is to understand your leaders and their decision-making style. And so present your options in a way that's really palatable and makes sense based on their decision-making style. And if you want to look back to, I believe, our April session, we talked about understanding the different personality and communication work styles and how to effectively influence those people, especially your leaders. All right, everyone, I'm going to switch back to the slides here. Thanks, everyone who contributed to the poll. We are going to move forward towards the, our recommended reading. Here we go. So I've mentioned a number of different steps and skills along the way. If you're just starting out to understand change management, do look up Kotter's 8-step process for leading change. You know, it's the things like come up with your business case, you know, enlist your guiding coalition, have your plan, your really good grounding in the fundamentals of the change management process. There's also a great article called 8 Best Practices of Change Management Sponsorship. And what this one is about is ways to coach your executive sponsors. So if that's where you'll start, look up the ExpressWorks article that we'll provide on our materials page and in the follow-up email. It's a great one on specific ways to coach your sponsors to get on board, to provide resources, to provide their influence, whatever your change initiative needs that might be lacking. And then when it comes to coaching people through the change curve, there's a great article on just that from Insights, which breaks down the different steps in the change process, but also how you might want to work with individuals to coach them through change. So again, if you are one of my Bay Area peeps, please do consider joining me on November 12th in Sunnyvale. The Poise for Leadership program has been reimagined and reinvented based on some new content and new research that's coming up in my book, which is launching in December. Learn more at beleaderly.com/PFL. And I'm just super grateful to our partners at NetApp Women in Tech for hosting us again. And mark your calendar, something really momentous is happening on Friday the 13th of December, and it's that my book, Woman of Influence, 9 Steps to Build Your Brand, Establish Your Legacy and Thrive, is hitting the stands. It is hitting the streets. And so I encourage you to join me in the launch. On our materials page and in the follow-up email, I'll share ways to participate on launch day, getting your copy, writing a review. But if you have a larger book group or a corporate group or professional association who wants to join my book tour in key cities, contact us about that information, and we'll also help you get a really big discount when you're buying 25 or more. So to get all of these ideas and resources, go ahead and send a text to 444999, and the code word is Leaderly. So text us the word Leaderly to 444999. You'll get our newsletter, the slides, the bonus articles, and more information on Friday, December 13th, the big day, the book launch. Mark your calendars too for 10 days earlier than that. Ask a Leader Anything on Tuesday, December 3rd. We'll have a candid discussion featuring a couple top execs who've seen a thing or two, and we're just devoting the hour to answering your leadership questions. So they'll bring their perspectives, but your questions will drive the conversation. All right, you know, I always like to save a parting truth bomb right till the end, and this one comes from thought leader and speaker Sally Hogshead, and she has just a great reminder of the importance of conviction and passion and relentlessness when we're out in the world being transformational change leaders. She said, the world is not changed by people who sort of care. So don't be someone who sort of cares. Go be a change maker and a change leader. All right, folks, if you've joined in a group, here come your discussion questions up on screen, and we'll leave these up for the next 30 minutes or so. I want you to think of a change that you went through that was tough but successful, and name a success factor. All right, so what was one success factor in getting through a challenging change? Next, question 2, think of a change you'd like to drive. Consider the 3 rules for rule breakers, and should you proceed? Next up, who will you rally as your crew? Who will you enlist as your passionate change champions and your change sponsors? And then finally, which of the 6 steps is going to be most useful as you fearlessly face the future and lead others through change? All right, everyone, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here in December. And here, it wouldn't be a webinar close without one of these. Here's a fist bump and sparkles, and a reminder that we're all always navigating change. But with these 6 elements, you can develop the mindset of an effective and remarkable transformational change leader. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care, and we'll see you back here in December. Goodbye.